The Volga is a river, the longest in Europe. But even more, it is a symbol. The symbol of the eternal Russia that has fired the imagination of travelers down through the ages. The Russian heartland with its villages of painted wooden houses and the elderly babushkas with their scarves around their head. The Volga. Just the name is enough to release an endless flood of romantic images. Boatmen chanting as they haul along the towpath. The endless steppes and forests of white birches lining either shore as if they were watching over Matushka Volga, Little Mother Volga, the pet name that all Russians use for the river. With the arrival of Soviet Russia at the beginning of the 20th century came the drive to construct factories and dams. The old historic cities of Nizhny Novgorod, Simbirsk, and Volgograd were renamed after the new leaders and became Gorky, Ulyanovsk, and Stalingrad, closed cities, strategic sites off limits to foreigners. Now the Volga has been reopened to tourist traffic. On our way to Astrakhan, we'll discover just how much the history of Russia and that of the great river are inextricably linked.
The Volga is, of course, important to Russia. And even today, the Volga, in a way, incarnates the soul of Russia. I would say that it is just as vast, calm, majestic, and monumental as Russia itself and its destiny. From a historical point of view, the Volga is a very important route. Ever since the Middle Ages, this European waterway has linked not only different populations, but also extremely different civilizations.
Situated in the European part of the vast expanse of Russia, the Volga, flowing from north to south, was the gateway for the long ships of the Varangian Vikings to enter the country. It also provided a protective border against the Mongol hordes. Nizhny Novgorod will be the first stop on our discovery voyage of the Volga. Like most of the Middle Volga cities, Nizhny Novgorod is a frontier town on the edge of the vast steppes of Central Asia. Ever since it was founded in 1221, it has been sheltered behind the walls of the Kremlin, which overlooks the Volga and its tributary, the Oka. Originally built out of wood, the Kremlin was regularly destroyed by the Tatar Mongols. It was not until the 16th century, when the present stone fortress was constructed, that the last attacks of the Golden Horde were finally driven back. From then on, the town began to thrive commercially. Even though it seems like the city is now awakening from its slumber and there is a certain drive, like in this little collective market, Nizhny Novgorod nevertheless preserves the nostalgic memory of the old international market. Before it was torn down by the Soviets around 1930, people would say, St. Petersburg is the head of Russia, Moscow is the heart, and Nizhny Novgorod the pocket, meaning the trading center.
At the end of the 19th century, Nizhny Novgorod was the biggest market in Europe, even bigger than the famous Leipzig market. And that was thanks to its geographic location. Nizhny Novgorod was a sort of crossroads between the north and the south and the east. And it was this geographical location that helped it become a trading center. They would bring Persian carpets from Central Asia, metalwork, nails, and sheet metal from Siberia, and manufactured goods from Moscow and St. Petersburg. It was also an important trading center for bread and cereals. The market price of the cereals was determined here in the market because all the fertile land lies south of the Volga, in the Astrakhan region.
The elimination of the free market system and the total planning of the economy meant the end of Nizhny Novgorod's market. The plaza in the center of the city where it used to be is now only a vast esplanade, where the Moscow circus sets up when it comes to town, under the watchful eye of a strange ringmaster.
конечно, сейчас вот такого почтительного отношения, да, о котором мы говорили.
It's clear that there's a traditional respect for the Volga.
Что во многих в эпосе,
The little
во многих
mother
народных
Volga that
песнях
was so praised
отразились.
in
Сейчас
songs,
такого отношения,
well,
конечно, уже нет.
that respect doesn't exist
Ну,
anymore.
вот определенная деградация вот, ценностей, она происходит.
We're witnessing
Но с
a
этим,
certain
наверное,
decline in
ничего нельзя
values.
сделать.
I think there's nothing we can do about
Но
it.
тем не менее, вот именно как
It's happening everywhere.
канал общения,
But the Volga is still a communication
она,
route.
конечно, сохраняет свою роль.
It still plays that role, and I think that it is still the soul of our
Остается, как
people.
мне кажется, душой народной.
Even if
В
they're
глубине
not
души,
consciously
может быть,
aware
народ
of
не
it,
всегда
even if
осознает,
they
и
throw
может
empty Coke
бросать
cans
в
into
неё
it.
там банки от
In the
Coca-Cola.
people's
Но,
subconscious,
тем не
the
менее,
Volga
в
remains the
глубинах
soul
народного
of Russia.
сознания, я думаю,
Night has fallen, and our boat, the Dmitry Formanov, leaves Nizhny Novgorod. We've begun our trip to Astrakhan. Next stop, Kazan. The Volga, a trade route since ancient times, has undergone radical transformations in the 20th century. In the 1930s, the socialist quest for hydroelectric power led to the construction of a string of dams and power plants. Hundreds of thousands of hectares of farmland vanished under the rising water. We leave behind the sunken worlds, wrapped in their watery shroud, and arrive at Kazan. Kazan is one of the oldest cities on the Volga. A vast restoration program is underway in anticipation of the city's 800th anniversary. 800 years, as if Kazan, the Tatar, needed to stand up and challenge Moscow. Kazan is the capital of Tatarstan, one of the republics of the Russian Federation. There are close to 2 million Tatars in the region, and they're quite attached to their identity and their differences. This can be seen above all by the Tatar language that we can see posted on street corners and on theater. The history of Kazan has been deeply marked by the 2 centuries of Mongol occupation. But towards the middle of the 15th century, the Golden Horde began its decline. The Khanate of Kazan, part of the Tatar kingdom, came into its own, and for a century and a half controlled the trade on the Volga. Then in 1552, Kazan, in its turn, fell into the hands of Ivan the Terrible. In the years that followed, Kazan was transformed. Behind the magnificent white brick walls of the Kremlin rose the star-studded cupolas of the Cathedral of the Annunciation. 4.5 centuries later, this masterpiece, symbol of the domination of the Russian Orthodox Church, was joined by a mosque within the very walls of the Kremlin. This sumptuous gift from neighboring Iran is an expression of Tatarstan's centuries-old attachment to the Tatars, who were Christianized and subjected to centuries of Russification, have nevertheless continued to speak their language and maintain their traditional way of life, especially in the inland.
I live here with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my 2 grandchildren. The little one is only 5. He's not in school yet. The other one's in elementary school. There are 5 of us living together. No, I don't speak a word of Russian. We village women have never learned to speak Russian. But the young people, like my daughter-in-law, speak it a little because they went to school. No, I don't speak Russian. Only our men attend the mosque. We women, we stay home. It's the tradition. It's the men that go to the mosque. We women, we do our prayers, but at home. I read some of the prayers from the Quran. I don't know them all by heart. We don't know a lot of prayers. We may not know a lot, but we do practice. We do follow the traditions. We observe Ramadan, the feast days. What we know, we do.
It's prayer time at the village mosque. The congregation, the sound of the chanting prayers rises up over the village and surely reaches the ears of Gizana, the babushka. It's a different world that exists in parallel with our own, a simple and innocent world, far from the glitter and pomp of
They are trying to stir up trouble between us. But you mustn't forget, these people here are farmers. They raise cereals. What they want is peace, peace for their land. They have absolutely nothing to gain by making war with their neighbors. We have a lot of mixed marriages. A husband doesn't make war on his wife if he's Tatar and she's Russian, and vice versa. It's a miracle. It's rare that these two diametrically opposed religions coexist in peace, and yet that's exactly what we've...
The next morning, the Dmitry Formanov is once again heading. For 250 kilometers, we cross the vast Kubichev Reservoir that separates Kazan from Ulyanovsk. For a long time, navigation on this stretch of the Volga had to take into account the closed cities.
We used to have to pass those cities at night. We could only pass Samara at night. We could only stop at Kazan, Ulyanovsk, and Zhigulivka. Then we'd go on to Malakovo and the island of the Maidens. From Volgograd, the boats would go to Rostov. It was a 10-day cruise, and then the passengers would fly back home. There were only 4 boats for foreign tourists. Now I'm afraid there are only about 50.
A series of cranes along the wharfs, a few freighters, boats running to the other cities of the region. The first sight of Ulyanovsk is very much like that of the other industrial cities along. However, in this port of call, we're going to discover one of the most important sites of contemporary Russian history. Here in Simbirsk, the city's former name, is the birthplace of Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, more widely known as Lenin. When he died in 1924, Simbirsk was renamed Ulyanovsk, and ever since, hundreds of thousands of Soviet tourists have been coming to make the pilgrimage every year. And even today, the former apparatchiks of the fallen regime still show the same devotion to the father of the Bolshevik Revolution.
He's a leader respected by everyone throughout the country and the planet. The memory of Vladimir Ilyich remains intact. His name, his work lives on. Of course, we felt the changes. The people who come to our museum while they're visiting this region of the Volga talk about Lenin, remember Lenin. They want to know about the life and work of Vladimir Ilyich and about his family. They consider him one of the leading figures of the 20th century.
At the end of the 19th century, Simbirsk was a peaceful provincial town with barely 30,000 inhabitants. It was proud of its beautiful wooden houses and its dozens of churches. Not a single church remains. They were all dynamited by the Stalinist regime in the 1930s. Now, the last remaining treasures of the city are the houses where the Ulyanov family once lived. During our visit, we were surprised to learn that Lenin's mother could speak 3 languages, including French, and that she read Victor Hugo, that his father, who was from Astrakhan, arrived in Simbirsk in 1869 to organize the province's high schools. And in 1870, Vladimir Ilyich was born into this world of petit bourgeois, as the revolutionaries would call it. We met a man whose destiny is linked with Lenin's, a man who knows him intimately. Anatoly Ivanovich is an actor, and for his entire career, on stage and screen, he has played but one character, Lenin.
When I auditioned for the conservatory, I recited a poem of Pushkin, then Twardowski's poem, Lenin and the Mason, where Lenin says, "You know how to give a good insult. You work well. Very good, old fellow." The director noticed that my voice was similar, and that with some makeup, he stopped the audition and said to me, "Just don't get a swelled head," for he wanted me to play the role of Lenin.
Maquillage, éclairage, attitude, la ressemblance est troublante. Mais elle ne serait rien sans la voix.
Tout est compliqué dans le personnage de Lénine. Mais le plus simple, ce sont ses attitudes ou sa façon de rouler les airs. Ça, c'était le moins difficile. Le plus difficile, c'était de traduire le cheminement de sa pensée.
His visionary spirit, his premonitions, the scope of his thoughts, the passion in his heart. His personality is such that it's an endless source of wisdom. Physically, it seems that I've assimilated his everyday body movements right into my bones. It impresses people. But I've never thought I was Lenin. I'm just one of his students. What else can I say? In all modesty, just a student sitting in the back row.
At the foot of the hill that the inhabitants of Ulyanovsk call the Crown, our boat is about to cast off for Samara. We continue our voyage, first across the Kubichev Reservoir, then back on the Volga itself, where it crosses the region of the Zhiguli Mountains, called Little Switzerland. On the way to Samara, some of the passengers try to pick up some Russian. Towards the end of the day, we approach the Lenin hydroelectric plant, which marks the boundary between the middle and the lower Volga. To pass this dam, which dates back to the end of the 1950s, the Furmanov has to go through 2 locks. In each lock, the boat drops 13 meters in a few minutes, bringing us closer to the level of the cast. We arrive at Samara early in the morning. During the second half of the 19th century, the city, which already had one of the best ports on the Volga, was linked by railroad lines to Moscow, Tashkent, and Siberia. These networks would play a vital role during the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War, as the Russian. It's the 9th of May. The tramways are circulating in a half-empty city. All of Russia is commemorating the victory over Nazi Germany and the end of the Great Patriotic War. The Western European countries no longer hold these grandiose celebrations to commemorate this day, for the tendency is more towards reconciliation and cooperation with the former enemies. However, for the Russians, the wounds have still not healed. We should keep in mind that their victory cost them more than 20 million lives and In 1941, when Moscow was threatened by Hitler's advancing troops, the Soviet government was transferred to Samara. Many inhabitants still remember and gather at the memorial to the victims of the conflict on a hill overlooking. However, not all the citizens of Samara are attending the commemoration. Many go out to the islands in the middle of the Volga. It's beautiful holiday weather. Perfect.
The Volga played a very important part at Samara during the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War. It was an important artery for transporting food, machines, equipment for the factories, and all the necessities for the population. The crossroads of the Volga and the railroad was the hub of all the industrial routing for all directions, the east, the north, the south. The hydroelectric dams on the Volga, there are 8 in all, transformed at the same time both the environment and the river as a water reservoir. The dams gave rise to veritable inland seas that flooded vast areas of land. They had to move villages to higher land. The creation of these new bodies of water caused a modification of the climate and a change in the river traffic. Navigation has improved because the rivers were deepened, which made it possible for river barges and large tonnage freighters
The river traffic has increased sharply, and not only on the Volga, but on all of the rivers, from the Sea of Azov to the northern basin near St. Petersburg. I've been sailing for 35 years. Many new inland seas have been created. The water level has risen. On the southern rivers, from the north of Kama down to Astrakhan, you used to see trainloads of timber coming downriver. They take a month to come down from the north. During the long voyage, you could observe the changes in nature, as if it was blossoming. There were no dams and no hydroelectric plants. That's why they could transport timber like they did with just one tugboat. But that's all been finished for 10 years now.
In the calm of the evening, the majestic Volga makes its way into a breathtaking landscape of steep cliffs. In the 17th century, this region was the hideout of Stefan Razin and his Cossack rebels who rode. An early morning in the rain, we go through the locks that take us to Volgograd. This city on the lower Volga has always been an important strategic site. There was a fortified outpost here as early as the 16th century to protect the boats and goods from raiding nomads. But it was during World War II that Volgograd, renamed Stalingrad in 1925, really made its name in history. In June 1941, the German army launched a huge offensive on Russia. In the spring of 1942, they concentrated their attack against Stalingrad, where the city controlled the oil reserves of Baku. With its back to the Volga, Stalingrad held out for 200 days, and then it dealt the Nazi army its first defeat since the beginning of the conflict. The Battle of Stalingrad, which was the turning point of the war, left the city in shambles. In the center of the new city, we can see a few ruins still standing here and there, like wounds. 1 million Russians died during that battle. On the top of Mamayev Hill, which never fell to the Nazis, stands a vast. Above the crypt, which houses the eternal flame, rises the statue of Mother Russia. 85 meters in height, it's the... It was at the factory where she was working that Valentina met her husband, Mikhail Ivanovich, a hero of the Battle of Stalingrad, a survivor. When the war broke out, Mikhail Ivanovich was a worker at Barricade, a paint factory.
I worked in the factory right up until the end, up until the Germans bombarded Stalingrad in the month of August. When the factory closed down, there weren't many of us left. So we went and fought to defend Stalingrad.
In September 1942, the Nazis intensified their attacks. Only a thin strip of land in Mamayev Hill remained under Soviet control.
The only uniform I had was a shirt. The pants and shoes were my own. I didn't even have a helmet, just a sock hat, like the kids wear today, a little sock hat. But it had a star on it.
Even though the 62nd Soviet Army was surrounded, it refused to give in. The fighting was street by street, house by house. Despite the bombings, a part of the population refused to be evacuated to the eastern bank of the Volga. The city was in ruins. The inhabitants dug in.
We were in a three-story building, the commune building. It was a total wreck. We were getting hit with 10, 12 counterattacks a day, but we fought them back. I remember I was lying next to an old-timer who said to me, "What's going on, kid? How many of them are there? We keep fighting and fighting, and there are still just as many of them. They're swarming all over. I can't stand it." We would fight during the day, but it would let up at night. They never attacked at night. As we were short of supplies, we would go out and recuperate the German machine guns. We would share them and use them right down to the last bullet.
The city was nothing but a vast ruin. Often there would be Russian and German combatants occupying the same building, but on different floors.
We knew that they were firing at us from behind. We were only 10 meters from the other building. The Germans had taken back the clinic. What could we do? The only thing we could do was to defend ourselves. The Germans would shout out at us, "Ruski kaput," Russians kaput. Russians bul-bul Volga. We're going to drown you all in the Volga. So we listened to that for a long time. Bul-bul Volga, my eye. We came back with insults and grenades. That was what the fighting was like in Stalingrad also.
With their backs to the Volga, the Russians used each bombed-out building as a bunker and dug in for a war of attrition. This allowed General Zhukov to regroup his forces. In the end, he managed to encircle the troops of von Paulus in Stalingrad. On the 31st of January, the German field marshal disregarded Hitler's orders and surrendered with 91,000 soldiers. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. But for Mikhail, the war continued. He crossed all of Europe with the Red Army, fighting in Romania, Hungary, and Germany.
I got back in December '45. Everything was in ruins. The factory was destroyed. I went back there in January 1946. Everything had been destroyed. What memories. How did we ever manage to survive such a nightmare? For a long time, I kept thinking about all the victims there, under the rubble. It took me a long time to get back to normal life.
After a week on the river, we reach our final destination, Astrakhan, the last city on the Volga. Up until the 18th century, Astrakhan was on the shores of the Caspian Sea. Those shores are now 100 kilometers away, beyond the vast delta formed by the many arms of the river. Peter the Great said that St. Petersburg was the window onto Europe, and that Astrakhan was the window onto the Orient. Even during Soviet rule, Astrakhan was never a completely closed city, since it never had a military-industrial complex, and it continued to control the trade between Europe and Asia, as it had been doing since the Russians annexed it in 1558. Tatars, Kazakhs, Tajiks, Kalmuks. Just observing the faces of the vendors in the central market is like a journey through Central Asia.
All the czars and monarchs tried to reinforce their presence in the lower Volga. Because it would allow them to control the trade routes to the east. And without that, they would have no leverage in that part of Asia.
The city, which was one of the capitals of the Golden Horde, then of the Khanate of Astrakhan, fell to the forces of Ivan the Terrible in 1558. A few years later, Astrakhan confirmed its standing as part of the Russian realm with the construction of a magnificent Kremlin, which contains several wonders of religious architecture. During the 18th century, many merchants who traded with Moscow settled in Astrakhan. The facades of their houses may fit in with the classical style of the period, but the inner courtyards, on the other hand, are more... The ethnic mix is regularly renewed by new arrivals, as is the case with the Tajiks, and even more recently, the Iranians, the neighbors from across the Caspian Sea. But for centuries, the main resource of Astrakhan has been fish. In the 18th century, many poor people and adventurers came down the Volga to Astrakhan on makeshift rafts. There are bream, seaweed catfish, but the most well-known fish remains the sturgeon. Even though you can still find the smaller sturgeon, which are known for their tasty meat, there's absolutely no caviar to be found in the market of Astrakhan. The major part of the production is exported.
Всегда было какое-то единство.
The Caspian Sea and the Volga have always formed a single entity. One can't exist without the other. It's impossible to separate them. They're inextricably linked. I don't know what the future holds in store for the Volga, but as far as the Caspian goes, it is certainly not very bright. Today, the gas and oil industries keep expanding. So they keep building more and more oil platforms and refineries. And that's all very discouraging, because it could endanger the biodiversity of the Caspian Sea and
80 kilometers south of Astrakhan, the Volga splinters into the labyrinth of its delta. This protected natural reserve has been... A few fishermen, grouped in kolkhozes, continue to fish the delta. They live on their boats for the duration of the fishing season. And perhaps this is where the future of the Volga and the Caspian Sea will be decided. Here, between the oil industry and the traditional way of fishing.
We got started at 7 in the morning. This is the 4th net that we've hauled in. We usually fish for about 2 hours at a stretch. We cast the net, we wait for it to sink to the bottom, and then we haul it in. Because of the heat, we keep the catch in tank boats filled with water to keep it fresh while we transport it to the smokehouse. The fishing is so-so right now. It's a lot better in spring when the water is high. Right now, it's too low. You don't get much sturgeon or salmon in this area. We're not allowed to fish them, and even if we do catch a redfish, we release it. But it's very rare. You used to catch them before. My village is on the Volga. That's where I grew up. Yes, the Volga is like an earth mother for us. Today, the fish come after gas and oil. We can't live without gas and oil, without fish either. So what can we do? The decision